Hello! Good morning guys! Welcome back to our class, Web Systems and Technology. Munti ko nang masabing welcome back to my YouTube channel. Anyway, so ayun po. So for today, we are going to discuss our 8th, I think this should be 9th, if I am not mistaken, 9th lesson in Web Systems and Technology. And it's all about JavaScript fundamentals. So far, we were able to discuss yung ating lessons 1 to 8 na, no? Lesson 1 to 8. The last lesson that we have ay yung ating lessons pala. Yung ating forms, of course, yung ating bootstrap, and the cascading style sheets. So for this day, we will be talking about the objectives of our lesson. We should be able to explain and understand the fundamental programming concepts, including data types, operators, creating and using variables, generating outputs, structuring your code to make decisions in your programs, or to loop over the same block of code multiple times, creating and manipulating strings and arrays, defining and calling functions, and so on. Of course, we should be able to also explain the idea of objects, the document object model, or DOM for short. Hindi ito yung dirty old man, This is document object model by using form objects. So, ito dapat yung mga matututunan natin by the end of this lesson. This lesson is quite long, and pretty much we want to make it as compact as it is, but we actually need to discuss JavaScript fundamentals for those who actually hate or find themselves that programming is challenging. Well, medyo challenging din to, but I'm pretty sure with your background in the basic programming such as C++ and Java, magkakaroon na kayo ng idea how to do JavaScript as well. So we will be just talking the basics and the fundamentals of it para sa ating lesson 9. Now, to tell you guys, or lesson 8 lang talaga, lesson 8, let me correct myself. This is lesson 8. So, ngayon, if you ever wonder with the things that we were discussing a few weeks ago, or this past few weeks, rather, we are talking and discussing about the user interface of the web. So, kumbaga, ito yung pinaka-itsura, physical appearance ng web nyo. But it doesn't really do anything yet. So, wala pang nangyayari. Kumbaga, talagang designs pa lang tayo. So, dito na sa JavaScript, pumapasok yung ilan sa mga functionalities na pwede nating gamitin in our web programming. So, now, JavaScript fundamental is actually the most popular and widely used client-side scripting language. Client-side scripting language, now it actually refers to scripts that run within your web browser. So, JavaScript is designed to add interactivity and dynamic effects to the web pages by manipulating the content returned from a web server. So, ito na yung sinasabi ko, meron ng functionality ang inyong web when you are actually going to use JavaScript. Now, JavaScript was originally developed as LiveScript by Netscape in the mid-1990s. It was later renamed to JavaScript in 1995 and become an ECMA standard in 1997. Now, JavaScript is actually the standard client-side scripting language for web-based applications, and it is supported by virtually all web browsers available today, such as our most favorite Google Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, Apple, Safari, etc. JavaScript is an object-oriented language. So it also has some similarities in syntax to Java programming language, but let me make it clear, JavaScript is not related to Java in any way. JavaScript is officially maintained by ECMA, or the European Computer Manufacturers Association, as ECMAScript. This ECMAScript 6 or ES6 is the latest version of the ECMA script standard. Okay, so ilan lang po ito sa mga information that you need to know regarding JavaScript fundamentals. Now, where can we actually apply JavaScript programming? Number one is the client-side validation. What do we mean by it? This is really important to verify any user input before submitting it to the server, and JavaScript plays an important role in validating those input at front end itself. So the second one is manipulating HTML pages. So what does it do? JavaScript help in manipulating HTML page on the fly. This helps in adding and deleting any HTML tag very easily using JavaScript, and of course modify your HTML to change its look and feel based on different devices and requirements. The third one is for user notifications. You can use JavaScript to raise dynamic pop-ups on the web pages to give different types of notifications to your website visitors. Of course, we also have the back-end data loading. JavaScript provides Ajax library, which helps in loading back-end data while you are doing some other processing. This really gives an amazing experience to your website visitors as well. Fifth, presentations. JavaScript also provides the facility of creating presentations, which gives website look and feel. JavaScript provides Reveal.js and Bespoke.js libraries to build a web-based slide presentations. And lastly, server applications. Node JavaScript is built on Chrome's JavaScript runtime for building fast and scalable network applications. This is an event-based library which helps in developing very sophisticated server, including web servers. So these are just some of the applications that you can do in JavaScript programming. So once again, those are client-side validation, manipulating HTML pages, user notifications, back-end data loading, presentations, and server applications. But the question here is what you can do with JavaScript. And there's a lot of things. In fact, those are almost the same things that I have mentioned a while ago on the application of JavaScript. Okay, number one, you can modify the content of a web page by adding or removing elements. 2, you can change the style and position of the elements on a web page. 3, you can monitor events like mouse click, hover, and react to it. And 4, you can perform and control transitions and animations. You can also create alert pop-ups to display information or warning messages to the user. You can perform operations based on user inputs and display the results. And lastly, you can validate user inputs before submitting it to the server. So those are the things that you can do with JavaScript. Alright, next thing that we will be talking about are the advantages of JavaScript. Of course, we need to know what are the capabilities of JavaScript that we can take advantage of. So number one, it is that it has lesser server interaction. Okay? So when we say lesser server interaction, you can validate user input before actually sending the page off to the server. Okay, this saves you server traffic, which means less load on your server. Okay, next, immediate feedback to the visitors. Of course, they don't have to wait for a page to reload to see if they have forgotten to enter something, no? Okay, dun pa lang magkaka-idea na sila, meron ba akong nakalimutan na iwan, so it's gonna take time if they don't know that. But the advantage of JavaScript is that it has an immediate feedback. Third one is that it has an increased interactivity. Well, you can create interfaces that react when the user hovers over them with a mouse or activates them via the keyboard. So that's why you will probably see a little like animation whenever you hover on something. So it's gonna highlight para mas makita ni user ano ba yung changes na ginagawa niya. Okay, next po, of course, it has richer interfaces. You can use JavaScript to include such items like drag and drop components and sliders to give a rich interface to your site visitors. So all in all, the advantages of JavaScript is that it will really have an impact to your not just the design, but of course the functionality of the whole web page as a whole. So mas nagiging dynamic web page siya instead of just a simple static web page na parang read-only web page. But of course, if there are advantages in JavaScript, there are some constraints, just like any other programming languages and client-side scripting languages, meron tayong mga limitations na tinatawag. We cannot really treat JavaScript kasi as a full-fledged programming language. It lacks the following important features. Okay, number one, client-side JavaScript does not allow the reading of writing files because this has been kept for security reasons. Second, JavaScript cannot be used for networking applications because there is no such support available for networking. Third, JavaScript doesn't have any multi-threading or multi-processor capabilities because it only runs on a web browser. Okay po, so those are some of the limitations of JavaScript. Now, how are we gonna add your JavaScript to your web pages, right? Of course, we will be embedding the JavaScript code between a pair of script tag. So, ito yung ating opening script and the closing script, just like, the other elements that we have been using in creating HTML tags. Second, creating an external JavaScript file with a .js name extension and then load it within the page through the src attribute of the script tag. So, pwede kang gumawa ng separate file, still using a Notepad++ that will do, but you have to save it as that, or for example, the file name is javascript1.js file extension name. Okay, para ma-identify ng web browser nyo that you're actually looking for a JavaScript. Okay, so the next step is to place the JavaScript code directly inside an HTML tag using the special tag attributes such as onClick, onMouseOver, on press, on load, and etc. So don't worry about this because we will be having a couple of demonstrations regarding JavaScript. Let's just go ahead and continue understanding the very fundamental of it. So how about the JavaScript syntax? How do we follow it? Okay, JavaScript can be implemented using JavaScript statements that are placed within the script tags in a web page. So you can place the script tags containing your JavaScript, of course, anywhere within your web page, but it's normally recommended that you should keep it within the head tags. So dapat nasa loob daw po siya ng head tags. Of course, the script tag alerts the browser program to start interpreting all the text between these tags as a script. A simple syntax of JavaScript will appear like this one. So, napakasimple lang naman po. No, mamaya magbibigay tayo ng mga example. Let me continue though. So, in JavaScript syntax, the script tags actually takes important attributes. The first thing is your language, no? Ano ba yung language? These attributes specifies what scripting language you are using. Like, typically, its value will be JavaScript. Although, recent versions of HTML and extensive HTML, its successor, have phased out the use of these attributes already. So, the second one is the type. This attribute is what is now recommended to indicate the scripting language in use, and its value should be set to text/JavaScript. So, ito yan. Text/JavaScript. So, ito yung language and then the type. So, these are the two important attributes of our JavaScript. So, of course, your JavaScript segment should look like this one. Ito yung opening script tag natin and the closing script tag natin. Inside the opening script tag is your language and your type attributes. And inside this opening and closing tags is your JavaScript code. Okay, now, what about the JavaScript display possibilities? Like, what can your Java be displayed in many ways? Okay, meron tayong tinatawag na writing into an HTML element using inner HTML. What do we mean by that? This is for you to access an HTML element. JavaScript can use the document.getElementById, opening and closing parenthesis ID method. Okay, this ID attribute actually defines the HTML elements, no? So, ito yung ID attribute natin. The inner HTML properties defines the HTML content naman. Okay? Next po is using document.write. For testing purposes, it is convenient to use document.write because using this document.write after an HTML document is loaded, this will delete all existing HTML. Okay, next po, using window alert. You can actually use an alert box to display data. So, ganun lang kasimple yung use niya. And then lastly, using console log. For debugging purposes, you can call the console.log method in the browser to display data if you wanted to check for errors and bugs. Okay, that's it for our JavaScript display possibilities. In a while, mag-create na po tayo ng example JavaScript codes. Okay, so let me open